All right, now very quickly we're going to review before we go to some exercises. We're just going to go through some different types of slips or some different moves, including just the standard slip, the step slips, and I'll show you very quickly kind of what they call the Loma, kind of the Loma type move. But just to review, okay, here we are. If he was throwing the left hand and I do a step slip, which would be like what we practiced, we were practicing to these different quadrants. Remember, I want to slip and pivot, slip, but make sure that I'm slipping responsibly and getting this hand up, right? Now I know if you want to be loose, right, you want to be loose, and so if you throw the jab, I can slip. You see what my instinct was? I'm not even in a position, but let's say I took a step and you did that too, and I'm loose. If I'm loose, my hands are all over the place and I'm wide, and it's not going to be a fast slip, because it's like if you are an ice skater and you know when you spin around, you see ice skaters, as their hands get closer to them, they start spinning faster. If you're compact, you can pivot faster. It's like you can spin faster, right? So I know there's some guys who want to be really slick, and that's okay, but if you have an irresponsible guard, you're not going to pivot very well. You're just not. Now, back to what we were saying. So, if we're going to do a step pivot, so he throws the jab, hold on, he throws the jab, I slip, take the step, come around. That's clear, right? If we're going to take a step pivot, which we have to do if we're orthodox, and I'm stepping to his strong hand, which is pretty scary, I've got to step outside of that back foot and to make sure I avoid that right hand. So he throws the right hand, I step outside the back foot. I don't take a big pivot, small pivot, because look where I am, right? If I take a big pivot, I lose my balance. Maybe he rotates and kills me, okay? So clear. Now, if we're not taking a step to the left, okay, but as we explained, make sure you're good enough, you've got that twitch, because you're loading that spring, because you're not going to be able to do it just like that, right? Not like a robot. So if we're here, maybe even if we're close to the getter, I'm fighting, I just step out, but what I'm doing is I'm doing a tiny, tiny move to get out. Now, it's small. It's just a twitch. It's just a twitch. We're here. I might even go low. But whatever I'm doing, it's not, there is this, you're from practicing these big moves, you can get this move, right, to get out. Okay? Now, the other side, we're not going to do this. We're not going to just stand here and without taking a step and get hit. Now let's talk very quickly, because you see a lot of people with these, the great thing about YouTube is you see Lomachenko all the time, right? What Loma will do, and you'll also see that I mentioned in these exercises, is when you're doing these quadrants, you can practice doing a step with your back foot and then pivoting off the back foot to the quadrant. That's pretty advanced, and it's a good way to get smacked. What you have to do, if we're here and he was throwing that and I want to take this step and get all the way around, it looks cool, but I tell you what, I'd better keep his hands busy. Whether or not I'm just like literally blocking him to move out, but that already violates, if you start trying to reach to block stuff, if I try to reach to block stuff and I miss, I'm getting hit. Or if I reach to block stuff, like if you reach to block me, I can actually pop that off on you. See how in what kind of shape he's in? So that kind of reach, which looks really cool, that Loma will reach out and he'll hold stuff down. Man, you're not Loma, I'm not Loma. But what you can do is if you want to try to do that big step with the back foot to get around, to do that pivot, which is dangerous, do it off something, you stiff jab and then spin around. Do it off some offense. But believe me, that's pretty scary. Look what happens if I do it wrong. What if I don't get a jab out there and I turn it but look what happens with his right hand. If I turn it, even if I get my hands up, I'm stepping out, swinging back. My momentum's going backwards. He hits me, I'm plastered. Now, there is one thing that happened to me one time, which is kind of funny, is that I was fighting a guy, and he did a pivot that just nobody does. is if you came forward to me very quickly, what he would do is he would spin out backwards like a toreador, right? I've never seen, I have seen people do it. This guy did it to me, and what happened was, I came to him, and when I spun out, and he just nailed me. But I wouldn't do that, because look what happens on that. If he comes forward to me and I try just to step straight back, all I'm going to get is the next, doesn't have to be a hook. It can be just a straight punch. You're like into hooks today. So that's not really something you practice. I mean, I guess it's possible. It happened to me. A guy did it to me and he hit me with it. I can't believe it. But that's not what you do. So again, last time we'll go through them. If he's here, you're going to practice these slips and step pivots. So he throws the jab, slip, step, pivot. I'm in a great position, right? If he throws here, I got to make sure that I get out of his outside foot. Small pivot out, and I hit him. If I'm not going to take a big step, maybe we're even closer and I don't want to risk, I try to take that step and I don't get out and I get in a bad position. If I just do a standard conservative thing, I still got to get that little cock and then I'm out. But it's hard. It's hard because he's not going to be slow on that. You can't wait for it. It's more one of those things that you do. You're fighting, you're throwing punches, and you just do it because, he even got my glove on that. You just do it because it's part of your rhythm, right? Don't wait. Don't wait for a punch to try to throw slip. And finally, you can't do a static one for that side, but we can try this Loma type thing. But if you do the Loma thing, not only get his hands, punch him, get his hands, but when you take that step, you need to get behind, really step behind him. Don't try the Loma thing, hit him, and then step way out here, because you're going to get hit, okay? All right, so now let's go to some exercises that will help you get this type of momentum down, that you can pivot fast, that you feel comfortable. Actually, I'm going to do that. So let's try to do some exercises that will help you get the ankle strength and help you get the torque so that you can slip and you can move and you feel actually like you can actually get around and use these things, right? Okay? Let's talk about what to do to get where you train yourself to get enough speed and torque and action to get where you can actually get these pivots and make them fast enough and natural enough to work, okay? Couple things. One, the first exercise, you'll be surprised, but when you need to do your jump ropes, right? When you do your jump ropes, the more you can learn on cool jump ropes, fancy jump ropes, I'm not going to do them here because it's on a carpet. I can do a little bit of it still. If you can do jump ropes, then that is great. Get your ankles strong. Get your calves strong. But if you saw an exercise I did in one of the warm-up videos, there's two things that I did that I always do. One, get your toes together, your knees together, and you're going to have a line, and you should go, say, about 10, 15 yards like this, and practice these side-to-side jumps over a line, and go backwards with them, keeping your toes and your knees together. One, it strengthens because if your toes and your knees are together, it's going to strengthen those ankle muscles, and it's going to strengthen the ones that you need to pivot. Then there's the next exercise. You're going to keep your chin down when we do this, and keep your hands on your hips. Same thing, but on one foot. Actually, I'm going to do it on this foot because I got a sore Achilles, okay? Same thing though. Hop back, oops, I'm not giving a good example. Hop back and forth over the line and then go backwards. But you go like 10, 15 yards. You do it with both feet. Now, the second one, obviously, is a little harder than the first one. A lot of times you'll find out very, very quickly which foot is stronger and what's your balance like, because it's easy to do this one. Doing the one foot all the way there and all the way back, that's not so easy. But you'll find you'll just find that when you move after you do these, 4 or 5 days a week before your workouts, it's really, you just feel better. You feel like you've got more strength, more torque. Now, the next exercise is something that we already talked about. These quadrants and these big step pivots, this kind of Mexican pivot exercise. I don't know if it's really Mexican, but these big step pivot exercise, that's where it seems like I already saw it. Now, Two things. You're going to practice. If you're shadow boxing, you're practicing your combos, right? I want you to think about everything that we've said the whole time. So you not only are just going to go in there and just practice pivots, just practice, but that's not enough. You need to practice, one, I want you to slip when you do the pivot and pivot around. You can do it to both sides. When you do the other side, you're going to slip to this other side and pivot, but don't pivot all the way around. Remember, we talked about that when you're going to left if you're orthodox. You're going to take that step and slip and come around. That, you'll be surprised what that does for you. Now, another exercise you can do with this, and I'll get Roman back here in just a minute, is this Loma step with the back foot to pivot. Now, that is more advanced. It's easy to screw up. I talked about that a second ago. But it is something a lot of times you're practicing, you're doing your pivots, come back doing the pivot this way. Oh, then you do that cool Lomachenko pivot, right? Where you're stepping and then with the back foot. No reason not to do it, no reason not to practice it, but make sure you're taking care of his hands when you're doing it. Now, last thing, when you're doing these, there's two things I want you to remember. One is that don't just pivot around with nothing going on. Practice your combos. Shadow box out of it, right? And when you shadow box, what do we do? If I throw a punch here and a punch here, this is my last punch if I throw a 1-2. So let's pivot to the other side and practice. This was my last punch, this hook here, because what I did is I threw a 1-2, I stepped and I pivoted. Uppercut, right, hook. Let's step back here, or if you want, you could come under back here, and then you're going to uppercut. But try to do what as I say, not as I do. Even if you dip under, you can't pivot if you step heel to toe, right? So if you bob, you're going to have to step to that toe to pivot out. And you can practice your pivots off this X. Or you can put, like I said, put a shoe or a kettlebell down there to step around and get used to that. Now, one other thing though, when you are getting used to pivoting, you got to keep a concept in mind. You'll see it with figure skaters, right? With figure skaters. If I have my arms out like a figure skater and I'm spinning around, I spin slower. When you see figure skaters bringing their arms in, they spin faster, right? It's just physics. So if you are someone who is fighting, so let's say you're a slick fighter and your hands are down and all that, that might be cool, but don't think that with your hands out and your body wide that you're going to be able to move around fast and smooth. You will be slow, I think, without losing your balance. And what's the point? If I'm fighting you, and let's say I do a step pivot in my hands are all out here and all that, what am I going to do out of that, right? Maybe you're the next Floyd Mayweather or Roy Jones or something. You have just incredible reflexes. Okay, but if I'm fighting and I'm tight, and I got a tight guard or even just a standard guard, but it's tight, right? And I step, I can pivot because it's just physics. My body's smaller. I'm not all herky-jerky with everything waving around out that. So you got to keep that in mind too. What I do is if I do something like this and I'm practicing out of a high guard, I practice out of a high guard and I think, bop, bop. So I'm throwing punches, but then what do I do? Again, let's say if I go 1, 1, 2, pivot out. But see, make sure 1, 1, 2. I threw the punch. My other hand was by my head. It's basically responsible defense. I'm gonna pivot, step to the next quadrant out of a slip, and then I'm coming around. But my hands are responsible. My elbows are to my body. I'm smaller and I can move. Okay, so I hope that helped. This is kind of a long video, which I seem to do. I hope you enjoyed that. Come back soon, like, subscribe. In the next video, we're going to go back to one of my favorite things, which is bumps, right? I love bumps. I think they're so applicable and people don't practice them. So we're going to go back to bumps and then since we've talked about pivots, and then we'll talk about bumps, we'll talk about what I think some of the advantages of bumps are, but that doesn't mean that pivots don't come in handy and you can't use them, okay? So like, subscribe, come back, hope to see you soon. Thanks.